What do you smell like? That's probably not the question that you would have gotten today. What do you smell like? The sense of smell is one of the most powerful but underrated senses that we have. If we think of the five senses, a lot of times we think with our eyes, our ears, but smell is something that we normally just think of in terms of food and nothing more. And yet, it's the sense of smell which is actually one of the first senses that a child has of their mother. Before any of the other senses, that's one of the very first ones. They smell what their mother smells like. And also very humorously too, when we deal with, as people are falling in love and romantic attraction, it's actually the smell of that person, these kinds of chemical reactions called pheromones, which are, in our sense, odorless, and yet it's the smell in which we're actually attracted to someone because of how they smell in this kind of invisible sort of way. You might not realize that, but that's the case. And even if we go into the world of animals, let alone humans, but horses have the ability of smelling you from a long way off, and they will remember that smell for decades and decades and decades, and when they smell that same scent, even over 30 years later, they'll remember you. So there's a power in the sense of smell that we don't appreciate. And today, though, the gospel is all about smell. We have a fragrant smell, and we have an odorous smell. And the gospel writer is wanting to use this sense to help us understand the call of discipleship and what it looks like. He's using it as a powerful metaphor. And Jesus himself wants to use this teaching on smell to help us understand how we live our life is how we smell. And how the house of our heart will smell a certain way according to what's put within it. If you think about places within your own house, maybe your children when they were growing up and had all of their stinky shoes or stinky socks or athletic equipment or whatever, that area, you open their particular room and, when they're trying to learn deodorant and stuff like that, it can be really smelly, and you close it. And then other areas where you smell the coffee or you smell chocolate or different things like that. And so depending on what we have in there, it is going to bring forth a certain kind of odor. So let's look at Mary of Bethany first. Mary of Bethany, she's in this home. Jesus is brought into her home. And Mary and Martha and Lazarus are the best friends of Jesus. Jesus has his close circle of Peter, James, and John. But he also had these friends that were not part of the apostles. They were disciples, they followed him, but he would go to their home and he would be able to rest. And he had a real friendship with each of them. And so Jesus himself had friends in his life that he needed to lean on. In the time when he would be ministering and having all sorts of different kinds of burdens, he would go away and be able to have dinner with these ones that were very close to his heart. Now, Mary of Bethany comes with this jar of aromatic nard, and she breaks it open and she pours it out. And it says that the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. So again, it's that whole image of what is being put into the house. And this image of this costly perfume is actually revealing the heart of this beautiful woman who is opening her heart and just pouring out love, pouring out sacrificial love, because it costs. And Judas is the one who points out that this could have been sold for 300 days' wages. So if you think of 365 days, it's about 82% of your whole yearly income. And it's just wasted on Jesus. So just think about that. Imagine all that you make, whatever that is, and you just in one instant used 82% of it to just pour it out on Jesus. That's a huge sacrifice. And maybe the people around you, if you just took that 82% of all that you made this particular year, and you just took it out of your wallet and you poured it at the feet of Jesus, people around you would probably say, "What are you doing? You could have used this in such a more efficient way." And yet it's really underscoring this radical sacrificial love that cost Mary of Bethany. But she puts it at the feet of Jesus. And Jesus, when Judas is trying to say, well, this should have just been sold and given to the poor, but then it points out that it says he said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he wanted that particular offering to go through his hands, because then he could take what he wanted and the rest could go to the poor. But do you see there's another kind of odor here? There's the odor of this woman who generously opens the cost of her heart to Jesus. Judas has the other kind of odor, the odor of death, the odor of selfishness, the odor of use, which is the opposite of love. He didn't care about this powerful, generous offering, and he didn't care about the poor. But he said, how can I use this situation to get more money for myself? Cloaked in a nicety, but underneath is dead man's bones. In some ways, it's kind of like that spray that you sort of put when something is really, really putrid in your house. And you just kind of pour this thing, and it's still in your house. But have you ever had that experience where you sort of have this like kind of cheap smell that's over this really terrible thing, and it's kind of like you can still smell the bad thing there, and it just is this kind of stuff on the surface, like a Febreze or something like that you put around, and it's kind of like, yeah, this thing didn't really clear it up. It kind of smells nice, but it's still there. That's what Judas is doing. He's pouring out the Febreze, and yet he's not cleaning up the mess that's right there. There's a skunk in his house, and he's trying to put Febreze all around it. So Jesus then confronts Judas in this moment and says, leave her alone. He says, in fact, the rest of that oil, she can save that and pour it out again for my burial. So Jesus is pointing out, what's the kind of sacrificial heart that you pour out in your house? What's the kind of life that you're living that becomes a fragrant offering to God? One of the Marians of the Immaculate Conception, Blessed George, would write a very beautiful prayer. And he said this, Lord, let me be like a candle consumed on the altar, or like grains of incense being burnt up as a pleasing fragrance to the Lord. This is what Mary of Bethany was. She became the costly perfume that was poured out. Because ultimately she was imitating the Master, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ handed himself over to be broken open for this full fragrance that would fill the house of God and would bring healing and deliverance. We don't want to be Judas. We don't want to even just cover over the smell, but we have to allow Jesus Christ to go into that part of our heart with a shovel. Sometimes it hurts, but to go right into that and scoop out the poop that's just sitting in the room. We can't just go around like this. We need him to go in, shovel it out, and then, only then, do we have space for this aromatic nard to come deep within our life. And then once it's filling our house, then it seeps out the cracks. Just like the poop, if it was sitting there, will sooner or later seep out the cracks, and you will know it by its fruit. You will know your life by its fruit. So allow the nard to be the one that seeps out of your cracks.